At some point early on in King Solomon's reign, he had an interesting encounter because God comes to him and says, Solomon, I'll give you anything you want. Name it, and you can have it, and it can be yours. And I think most kings would have answered, especially in that time, but probably presidents, dictators, leaders, even today, would say something like more power, more influence, more money, more land, more fame. You know, whatever you put in that category is more for me and my country or my situation. But Solomon's response was interesting because he said, God, what I really want is wisdom. In fact, the reason why I want wisdom is because I'm young and I need to know how to be a better leader to serve and to lead these people who you've called to be set apart in order to show more of your glory. And so I think God was so impressed. In fact, the scripture talks about this in 1 Kings. He was so impressed by Solomon's response that not only does God give Solomon wisdom, but he also gives him money and fame and power. And so it got me thinking, like, hey, if we were, because this all happened in a dream, if we were to go to sleep tonight, go to bed, and we would have a dream, and it would seem so real that God was speaking to us, and he would say to you, he'd say to me, hey, whatever you want, I'll give to you, name it, and it is yours. What would your answer be to that question? And I know we're in church, so probably some of you just shout out Jesus, you know, because that's like the Sunday school answer, like, give me more Jesus, right? And yeah, but seriously, like, how would you answer that question? The God would say to you, hey, whatever you want, it's yours. Name it, and I'll give it to you. I think in order to answer this question, I think we need to dissect this a little bit by having me ask you guys some questions. And so one of those questions is, what do you think about all the time? How would you answer that question? Like, what goes on in your head? Some of you would be like, that's a scary proposition, but what goes on in your head during the week? Another question might be, in order to answer that question, is, what do you spend the most money on? Where do your resources, where do your finances go? Maybe another way of answering that question is, what do you spend the most time doing? So what do you think about all the time? Where do you spend your resources? But what do you do? Where do you spend most of your time? And ultimately, the question needs to be, and this is what I want to challenge us with and dig into a little bit this morning, is, what do you desire most? What's your heart's desire? We'll come back to that question. There are moments in life where, we just kind of recall like those highlights. And I'm not necessarily talking about the spiritual highlights, but just life experiences. And so if you were to ask me like, hey, what would make the top 5 in my life looking back? And this, beyond my marriage and my family, of course, those are like the main highlights, and giving my life to Christ and accepting call to ministry. Like, those are a given. But if we were to just kind of take that, set that aside for a moment and look back and like, hey, what would make the top 5 like moments, life experiences that you would just say, wow, like that was amazing? I'd have to admit to you this morning that to see the Himalayan mountains in all their glory, and I've told a lot of stories about this if you've been following along in messages over the years, and so there was one opportunity that we had a couple years ago to climb this hill, which they call them hills. Here we would call them mountains, but it was called Poon Hill, 10,000 feet up in the air, 10,000 feet rather, elevation. And so we went with a missions team. We said, hey, we're going to do Poon Hill trek. It takes a couple days to do it. It's 9 miles journey up, 9 miles back down. And it was a difficult hike, in my opinion. I've never hiked anything that high and that long before. So it was an incredible experience. But one of the things looking back on that just got me thinking was I ran into this family, and they had like 3 kids. And what was so funny about that is you got a mom and a dad. Everyone else was under the age of 8 years old. Like, they had a I kid you not, a 3-year-old hiking this trek. Like, and it made me think, dude, why are you whining about this? Like, there's a 3-year-old showing you up right now. But we're crossing because they're on their way back. And so on their way back, we were just chatting a little bit because we were resting. And they're like, yeah, the hike was awesome, but man, when we got to the top, we didn't see anything. Didn't see the mountains. In fact, it was so bad that it was foggy and rain had come in. And it got me thinking, like, oh my gosh, like you've worked, to all this time, like to get there and to get up to the top, and you've spent this money and you've got your family with you, only to see like nothing, only to experience disappointment. And so the rest of the trek on my way to the top, I'm thinking the same thing, like what if? What if that doesn't happen? What if I don't get to see the mountains? What if we spend all this time and all these resources getting there and just nothing? Well, thankfully, we get to the top, and this was my view early in the morning. This is right at sunrise. And this picture, how pictures do absolutely no justice to the experience? Like, this is one of those. Like, this was just breathtaking, give you the chills, like, oh my gosh, the grandeur and the massive mountains. Like, there was like a spiritual connection in that moment that I had. It was amazing. And our team was blown away. We took tons of pictures. I didn't want to leave. Like, I just wanted to spend my time at the mountaintop. But my mind kept going back, like, what if? What if I didn't see these mountains? What would it have been like? What would the disappointment have felt like? And so as we think about what is it that you desire most in life, I think a lot of people, they think like, man, if I get to the top, and whatever that is, fill in the blank, we'll talk about that in a second, but like, if I get to the top, if I can just get there, I will be happy. Some people think like, hey, if I can just get married, getting married is just going to solve all my problems, and life is going to be easy, right? Life will just be so much better. And yes, there is, husbands, you'll smile at your wives right now because marriage is great and it's a wonderful thing and it is a gift. But some people think like, hey, if I get married, then I've arrived. And I think that the church has done an injustice in that conversation because the end-all, be-all is not marriage, by the way, newsflash. That's not the goal in life. Some people think if I just have enough money, if I can just get that job, then I've arrived, right? Or if I can just get into that school, then I'd be satisfied. Or, hey, if we can just become empty nesters, once the kids leave, like life will be good, we can coast, we'll be happy. If I can just retire, if I can just get to retirement and have enough, like life's good and I'll be happy. And see, sadly, that's like how culture operates. But what happens is we get there, we don't know what to do with ourselves because you get to the top when what you're looking for is the happiness and the stress-free life, and it's just not there. It's like that family getting to the top. It's like there's nothing. We can't see anything. It's just like this hopeless feeling. In fact, look what Proverbs, because we've been in this series of Proverbs. This is the last week, by the way, and I hope it's been a helpful journey for you as we seek wisdom together. But Proverbs 27 has an interesting take on this because the writer says, just as death and destruction are never satisfied, so human desire is never satisfied. Now, I want you to think about that, ponder that, because he's saying human desire is never fully and finally satisfied. And as I'm reading this and studying this, I'm thinking like, really? Really? Like, never satisfied? Because there was moments when I was in Italy and I had food and I was satisfied. Like, I was good. Like, if I were to die in that moment, I would die a happy man. But then the next day happened, and what happens? Like, hunger kicks in. So what does Solomon mean when he says human desire is never satisfied? What he means is the deepest longings of your heart, the stuff that goes really deep, like your desire for significance, your desire for purpose, your desire for value and acceptance and of worth, those things can never be fully and finally satisfied in this world. You will never be satisfied if you keep looking to the world for all those things that you think will give you life, that will bring you joy and peace and hope. You can climb the money hill, and we know this, right? Sometimes just kind of like preaching to the choir. Maybe you don't know this, but I think a lot of us know this. Like, you climb the money hill, it won't be there. You climb the relationship hill, it's not going to be there. You climb the achievement hill, it won't be there. You climb the career hill, it's not going to be there. There is only one hill that contains what you're looking for, and that is in a relationship with your Heavenly Father. In fact, I love what Tim Keller writes about this. He says, if you love anything in this world more than God, you will crush that object under the weight of your expectations. Let that settle for a moment. See, it's not wrong to love the things of this world. In fact, the things of this world were created for our pleasure and our enjoyment. But when you love them, and when you desire them, and when you long for them more than you desire your Heavenly Father, that's where the problems begin to arise in our lives. In fact, so much so that Tim Keller says, you will crush that object under the weight of your expectations. Now, have you ever had high expectations for anything? What about marriage? Walk into a marriage like, yeah, we have high expectations, right? But this is one of the things that we tell young people in premarital counseling, is if you're only looking to your spouse or your future spouse to fulfill all your needs, to give you purpose and value and worth, pretty soon you are going to crush them under the unfair expectations. And eventually they will say, I can't be what you need me to be for you. Because only Jesus can fulfill those deepest desires. Parents, if you're looking to your kids to bring you that deep satisfaction that your heart is longing for, whether it be like their well-mannered behavior in public, or their high achievements in school, or how well they do in some extracurricular activity, whether it's the arts or whether it's sports, to make you feel good about yourself based on their performance, you will crush your children under the weight of your expectations, and they will eventually feel that pressure. Given enough time, they're going to feel that pressure, and they will either rebel against you or they will just withdraw and quit. Why? Because hear me out, no person, place, or thing or relationship can meet your deepest longings and your deepest heart's desires. Only God can do that. Proverbs has a lot to say about desires. Here are a few. Proverbs 10:24 says this, what the wicked dread will overtake them. What the righteous desire will be granted. He's saying that there is a moral component going on here to our desires, that if you're walking with God and obeying God, our desires are much more likely to be fulfilled if we're walking in step with the Lord. Another time, the writer says, the righteousness of the upright delivers them. But the unfaithful are what? Say that with me. Oh, come on, guys, wake up. Here we go. But the unfaithful are, okay, I just want to make sure it's there, and it's not. So I was wondering why you're not with me. Do we have that one? No. Okay, we'll go with that. The righteousness of the upright delivers them, but the evil desires trap them. Okay, I must have had a different version. So let's say trap together. Trap. I'm not tracking. You're tracking. I'm not tracking. Okay. Here's where I want to take us this morning. Our desires can trap us. Our desires can easily ensnare us and entangle us. Wise people don't accept their desires as they are. But see, that's the opposite, and we've talked about this, we talked about this several weeks ago, how that's the message of culture, right? People will tell you, follow your heart, right? Follow your heart's desires, follow your emotions, trust how you're feeling, and base your decisions on how you're feeling at the moment. And listen, emotions can be a good thing, right? Intentions can be a good thing, but we can't trust our own heart. The Bible talks about how our hearts, we were born with a wickedness, a sinfulness. And culture is saying like, hey, do what feels good, do what feels right to you, and that's how morality will be set in motion, and that is totally false. And so it brings me back to the question, what do you desire most in life? Tim Keller wrote a book, it was really a devotional called God's Wisdom for Navigating Life. And this is such a great devotional. I recommend this one if you want to just keep diving into Proverbs. This is a great companion, by the way. If you're doing another devotion and you just want to read a proverb and get some perspective on it, this is one of those things that you can pick up and read for a couple weeks and maybe sit down, take a break from it. But it takes about a whole year to read. So I recommend this devotional. It's a really good one. And he talks about how our desires can trap us and how, as followers of Jesus, we're called to reorder those desires. So it's not necessarily wrong to have certain desires, but what does wisdom say about these desires? How does wisdom from God influence the things that we desire in our lives? And so he talks about these three main desires that can trap us, as the writer in Proverbs says, that tends to take God up here and put him down somewhere over here in our lives. And so I want you to be thinking about these three things, because one of them, maybe all of them, is something that you wrestle with, but there's usually one that we tend to struggle with. And so let's see if, as we go through these, that you can maybe relate to any one of these. The first one is approval. Proverbs 29:25 says this, "Fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe." Some people live their lives just obsessed and dragged down and bogged down based on what people think of them. Here are some indicators, and maybe this is helpful to you to help you kind of lean in and pay attention, but if you're struggling with approval or this longing for approval from others, here's some indicators if that might be true for you this morning. Number one, you are overly sensitive to criticism. Now, I don't know anybody that just says, I love criticism. Like, I want to hear it every day. Like, that can be tough, right? So you might, say for example, like you might have accomplished something. Maybe you finished a project at work, or you've just done something that has drawn some attention. And imagine with me if 10 people offered you encouragement to just say, wow, that was awesome. Like, you did an incredible job with that. And then you get that one voice. Out of the 10, you get one more, and it's this voice of criticism. And man, that just guts you. Because you've heard these 10 positive things, but all you could be thinking about is like that one negative thing. Or maybe there's people that with the right intentions, like their heart is in the right place, they want to give you constructive criticism and feedback, and maybe there's a rapport and a relationship and a trust there, but man, you just have such a hard time receiving that criticism, so much so that you just get defensive. Like, oh, you do the same thing. Or, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. You have no expertise in this field. And we get defensive and we start to build up walls. Number two, you have a hard time saying no when it comes to just pleasing people and this desire for approval. And your plate might be totally full. Like, you have all these family obligations. You got, games that you got to get your kids to. You got commitments at church and deadlines at work. And you've got all these things at home that you got to get done. And you are exhausted at the end of the day. And someone comes to you and says, hey, could you do this for me? And you're like, I don't want to disappoint this person, so I'm just going to say yes. And you just add that one more thing to the pile of all the other things that you have a hard time, or have, got to do in life. And then maybe somebody else comes to you and says, hey, could you do this for me? And you're like, sure, why not? You don't even really think of it because you want their approval too. And by the end of the week, you are just stressed, you're exhausted because you keep saying yes to all these things. If you forget anything else in this message, maybe you can remember this. Like, for some of you need to hear this. It's okay to say no. Okay? That can be a very godly word in your life as we talk about rhythm and health. Like, it is okay to say no to people. Now, I don't recommend that to your spouses, but like, if you're married, but it's okay to say no. Number 3, you overthink things. You're spending too much time worrying and dwelling on past mistakes. Maybe you have a hard time just falling asleep at night because you're just playing that thing in your head over and over and over where you screwed up, or man, did I get that right, or did I say that right in that conversation, or did I disappoint that person at work, or did I mess up in this situation? You're just playing that over and over in your head. Number 4, you fear disagreement or conflict. You just get really uncomfortable with differing opinions. And you just want to be liked by everyone, so that you just try to avoid conflict altogether, and you don't say anything, even though you know it might be wrong, or even though you know there's a moment where you might need to speak up on behalf of somebody else. But instead of dealing with it and confronting it, you just let it fester. And then resentment begins to build up. Some of you can relate to this. You just walk around with this low-grade anxiety, going around thinking, man, I hope I didn't upset him. I hope I didn't upset her. Man, they didn't text me back. Hope I didn't offend them. See, we need to pray that God would set us free from that. You need to pray, God, would you help me care less about what others think and more about what you think? Would you help me seek your approval above all else? I love how Eugene Peterson, he kind of orchestrates these words in a different kind of way in Proverbs 29:25 that we just read. He says, the fear of human opinion does what? It disables. But trusting in God protects you from that. Our security, our confidence is found in what God thinks of you, not what other people think of you. You know what he thinks of you, by the way? Some of you need to hear this morning, that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. God's saying to you this morning, you're my kid. You're my daughter. You're my son. You are so valuable to me. You are beautiful. You are incredible. You are amazing. You are loved. You are worth dying for. That's what God thinks of you. This verse found in Galatians is a very comforting verse for me, but at the same time, it's also been very challenging, because this is something that I wrestle with too, is just people pleasing. And it's very, very easy to get sucked into that when you're in a leadership position or when you're in ministry. But look what Paul says. This is so good. Am I trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I just trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. He just makes it pretty clear. You can't pursue, he's saying, the things of God and the things that God has called you to do if you're always trying to please people. If you're obsessed with what people think about you. The bad news is this, like, you can't please everyone. You can't. It's impossible. But the good news is that you can please God. Could you imagine if Paul, the Apostle Paul, operated out of a place of man's approval? Paul ticked off a lot of people. He was mocked. He was rejected. He was spit on. He faced many attempts where people tried to kill him, by his own colleagues, by the way. He was beaten physically. He was left for dead, being stoned. He was whipped. He was, many times, imprisoned in solitary confinement. And eventually, Paul was martyred for his faith in Jesus. But despite his sufferings, Paul persevered, knowing that all of it was for a greater purpose. And he knew, above all else, I am in it. I'm doing this not to please man. I'm doing this to please my Heavenly Father. Could you imagine if all of us in the room decided, you know what, I'm done. I'm done trying to please people. I'm exhausted by it, by the way. I'm in it from here on out to please God. I'm choosing to please God first with my whole life. Here's the second trap. First one is approval. The second one is pleasure. Writer says, whoever loves pleasure will become poor. Whoever loves wine and olive oil will never be rich. So contrary to popular belief in certain church circles, again, God is not against pleasure. God created pleasure. Come on, God created naps, right? God created Reese's Blizzards. Amen. God created pizza, he created food, he created a lot of stuff for our enjoyment. So God clearly is not against pleasure, but look at what the verse says. Those who what pleasure? Love pleasure. More than they love God, more than they desire God, he says they become poor. And the writer's not talking about materially becoming poor, not having any money or resources, but relationally and spiritually and mentally poor. Here's the problem with the love of pleasure. It's never enough. You will never, ever be fully and finally satisfied. You'll always want more. You'll always want more food. You'll always want more to drink. You always want more sex. You'll always want more entertainment. You'll always want more cheap thrills. You'll always want more trips. You always want more vacations. You'll always want more highs. You always will want more. It'll never be fully and finally satisfied. One of the most powerful examples of resisting temptation in all of Scripture, in my opinion, where this person maintained integrity and said, no, I'm going to trust God in this, even in the midst of suffering and even in the midst of adversity, was Joseph in the Old Testament. When Potiphar's wife, Potiphar was Joseph's boss, so when his wife came to him and tempted him, watch what Joseph says. He says, no one is greater in this house than I am. In other words, like he has been given a lot of authority. My master has withheld nothing from me except you because you are his wife. So there it is. He knew God's standard. How could I do such a wicked thing to sin against God? And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her, even to be with her. See, it would have been very easy for Joseph just to say, you know what, no one's looking around, and given to pleasure. I deserve this. I've been treated like trash my whole life. Why not? But he knew not only what was at stake, but he knew more importantly, he loved God more than the world's pleasures and even his own pleasures. He knew there was something in him that knew that pleasure, even though it would have been enjoyable, was fleeting and would have caused so much damage. Listen, sin, come on, it's fun, right? You may have come to church and not expecting to hear that from the pastor. Like, sin can be fun. If that weren't true, people wouldn't do it, right? Come on, it can be a little fun to gossip in the break room. It's fun to have sex outside of marriage for a while. It's fun to drink more than we should on the weekends. But it is so fleeting. Maybe this will help illustrate it. How many know what this is? Come on, help me out here. Big Mac, all right? Now, yeah, I heard some groans, okay? Now, here's one of those things for some, and this is not everybody in the room, but some might admit like something like this, or maybe even this particular meal, might be enjoyable for the first 20 minutes after eating it. And then it might hit you, and you're like, oh, maybe, oof, maybe I should have passed on that. And I think sin can be a lot like that because it goes down easy. And it may taste really good. And maybe you're like, oh, I needed that. I was so stressed. I've been so busy, been so exhausted. Man, that just feels good. And then you wake up the next morning, or maybe it's a week later, maybe it's a few weeks later, maybe it's a month later, maybe it's years later. And you go, why did I do that? I don't feel good about that anymore. Hear me out. The pain of sin always outweighs the pleasure of sin. I'll say it again. The pain of sin always outweighs the pleasure of sin. That's why God hates sin so much, because he knows the pain it causes us, and he knows the pain that sin causes people around us and how much it hurts. And I think a wise question we need to ask ourselves this morning is, will the pain of sin or the pain that sin causes outweigh the pleasure that it might provide in the moment? And can I just say to you this morning, the answer is always yes. It's always yes. You know, I love watching a good movie. Especially, I love the kind of movies where you're trying to figure it out and you can't, because the writing is so good, and you're like, I don't know who did it, or I don't know how this is going to end, but I know it's going to mess with me. I love the movies that mess with me at the end. I'm not kind of like the happy ending type. I know there's probably some in the room that you just want a good happy ending. I don't have to have a happy ending. I want this movie to mess with me a little bit and be like blown away by the ending, because it's not what I expected. Okay? But like I said, there are some people in this room that just want a good, happy ending. And I would venture to say that if you are that person, you may enjoy Hallmark movies. Okay? Fall is coming, all right? And right after that is winter. And I know I hear there's some good Hallmark movies coming out. There's one, like, I'm a Bills fan, and they're doing one based on the Buffalo Bills, and I don't know how I feel about that. It kind of feels icky a little bit, because they're mixing Hallmark with my team, right? My football team, all right? See, the thing about Hallmark movies is, I mean, unless you're just like out of it, or you're not a sharp person, and I don't want to insult anybody in the room, but if you ever watched a Hallmark movie, you know where it's going. Like, you know what's going to happen. You know, like, every time, like, they're eventually going to meet, and they fall in love and happily ever after, right? Wisdom has the ability to see where the movie of your life is going. When it comes to your spending habits, when it comes to your eating habits, when it comes to your drinking habits, when it comes to what you see on the computer, what you decide to see on the computer, when it comes to your decision on how you treat other people, my encouragement to you this morning is play the movie forward. Play the movie forward. Think about the damage that your one decision or series of decisions can cause in your life. Some of us are dealing with a lot of pain in our past because we ignored all that and decided, you know what? I'm going to disobey God because I love pleasure more than God. And so don't let pleasure entrap you. Play the movie forward. God has given you the ability to see somewhat into the future. Not entirely, but we often know, like, hey, is that going to be a good decision? I love what Pastor Andy Stanley talks about, this whole idea of asking the question, what does wisdom say? Like, what does wisdom have to say about this situation? In light of my past experiences, in light of my current circumstances, and in light of my hopes and my dreams, what does wisdom say about this situation? What is the wise thing to do? Could we just say that together? What is the wise thing to do? 1, 2, 3. What is the wise thing? My gosh, what if we asked that question when we're faced with tough decisions? Here's the third thing that tends to trap us. And this is something that we talked about. If you remember, you were here a few weeks ago, but I want to revisit this. Third trap is control. The second night, we were in Rome, Italy, and I get this phone call from my daughter at midnight. And when you get a phone call at midnight, now I understand there's a time difference, but like when I wake up with a phone call from one of our kids, like I'm immediately thinking the worst. Like, okay. So I had to take a deep breath, answer the phone, and come to find out, I knew my kids were traveling at the time, but they're going to South Carolina, and on the way there, their car broke down. And immediately, like, I'm trying to get all of the cobwebs out and think about, okay, what I need to do? And I just kind of went into a little bit of a freak out mode in my mind. Now, what I was trying to do is help calm my daughter down, but internally I'm like breathing heavy. I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? This is like, I'm so far away. I can't do anything to help. I can't control the situation. And so we're looking for garages, and they're all closed at this time because it was like 8 o'clock at night on a Sunday night, right? And they're traveling, and it's got my son and both my sons and another friend, and they're on their way to this baseball camp. And so I'm trying to figure out what I do. My poor daughter's crying, and I can't blame her because I wanted to cry in the moment. I mean, they're stuck on the highway. And I'm thinking of the worst. Somebody's going to take them. Someone's going to kidnap them. They're not going to be able to get where they need to go, and then it's going to get dark, and they're going to have to sleep in the car because she's too young to get a hotel. All these things are going on in my mind. And finally, I settled down and made some phone calls. I found this dude on Facebook, okay? And he had this, garage in Podunk, America, but he was so nice because he drove 30 miles to come and meet them and to help them fix the car. And the car ended up getting fixed and ended up going where they needed to go. But I had a really hard time falling asleep that night because I went to bed and they were still on their way, and I'm thinking, are they going to make it? Is the car going to break down again? Are they going to get hurt? Are they going to get into an accident? And I was so worked up over something I could not control, even though I so badly wanted to take control of the situation. And often our desire to control things is birthed out of fear of the what ifs. And just worrying about things that we can't control. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if I run out of money? What if this person gets sick? What if? And worry is usually an internal response to something that is happening externally. In fact, we can't control what happens to us, but I want you to know this morning that you can control what is happening in you. I can't control all of the hard things that are happening around me. I can't control what people do to me, but I can control how my soul responds. I can control how my mind responds and my heart responds, because you and I are going to experience difficulty, pressure, and suffering. And by the way, wishing for these things to go away will not make them go away. And oh, by the way, being a Christian will not make them go away either. We are all fully aware that life has this way of being stressful, hard, painful, unfair, and even tragic, because there are things that are happening in this world that are beyond our ability to control. And so what do? Some people would tell you, just white knuckle it, right? Just fight through it. Just grin and bear it. Fake it till you make it. There's all sorts of bad advice out there. But I thought this next picture might help us. Give us some perspective. This is called the Great Wave of Kanajawa. Some of you might know it as the wave. And the wave emoji, actually on your phone, is based on this drawing here. But what is the first thing that you notice in this picture? What is it? What is the first thing that you see when you look at this picture? What is it? It's the wave, right? It's front and center. It's massive. It's overwhelming, which is a lot about the things that we tend to worry about and tend to freak out about. In that moment, when I was in Italy and I had no control, this was my wave. My kids, could they get there safely? And there's things in life that we want to control that are huge, that are scary, that are overwhelming. Now, what's the next thing that you notice is that you got all these people, tiny people in a tiny boat. And you see the perspective of how much bigger the wave is compared to all the people. But then off in the distance, what do you see there? You see a little mountain. That's Mount Fuji. And what's so interesting about that is the mountain, and what you don't realize is Mount Fuji is a gazillion times bigger than that wave, that little wave. And God is a lot like that mountain in the picture. He's 1,000,000 times bigger than anything that we worry about or want to control. But unlike this picture, God is not just way off in the distance separated. In fact, there was a story in the New Testament where Jesus was actually in the boat when there was a storm going on and there was waves. You know the story, right? He was in the boat, huge storm going on. Do you remember what he was doing? He was napping, right? He was taking a nap. Jesus, what are you doing? Like, are you kidding me? Like, there's a storm going on. Like, this is crazy. We're all going to die. And here you are napping. And it was as if Jesus was saying to them in that moment, I got this. Relax. It's okay. I know the things around you are huge and insurmountable. They seem huge, and I know it seems scary and that your life is going to capsize, but you have a Father in heaven that is so much bigger than what you're facing right now. And not only is he so much bigger, he knows. And not only does he know and he's fully aware of what you're going through, but you remember the story? He's in the boat with them. He's in the boat with you. So if he knows, and if he's so much bigger than all of our problems and the issues that we're going through, and he's with us, I'm telling you, like, that should indicate something. It should indicate that you can trust him. Several weeks ago, I mentioned Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. You've seen this verse. A lot of people have it on tattoos and signs and whatnot. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own standing. In all your ways acknowledge him. He make your path straight. Let me go back to Eugene Peterson, because I love how he phrases this. He says, trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Don't go off on your own just trying to figure it out and trying to control it. But instead, listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one who's going to keep you on track of where you need to go and where you need to be. What would it look like for you and for me to truly trust God with all your heart? What would it look like to say, God, I want your wisdom. I want to seek out your wisdom. I want to listen to your voice. I want to submit to you. And just to let God control what he can control. Which, by the way, is everything. There is nothing beyond the scope of your Heavenly Father. Did you know that? Nothing. And so when you find yourself worrying, when you find yourself stressed and anxious and restless because there's something like just beyond your control, you can pray to God, God, would you help me trust you? To not lean on my own gifts and my own understanding, my own resources, trying to control it, but help me to trust you. Whatever the outcome, Lord, I'm going to trust you. Whatever happens, I'm going to trust you. Good, bad, even if nothing happens, I'm going to trust you. I love what Augustine says. He says, thou hast made us for thyself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it finds rest in thee. What if we came to God this morning and said, God, I need rest. God, I need your help. I have this need for approval. I have this need for pleasure. I have this need for control, and I know it's unhealthy, and I know that things need to change. God, I need you. And I know none of those things bring satisfaction. God, only you can satisfy at the deepest level. So let me ask you, what would it look like to put God, we need these reminders, by the way. Every week, I need these reminders. We all do. Like, what would it look like for you to put God first this week? Starting when you leave here and starting on Monday morning? What would it look like practically rather than just getting up? In fact, I'm excited in a couple of weeks we're going to be talking about what it means or what it looks like to start your day and some rhythms that I think we need to think about as we head into a new season. But what would it look like for you, instead of jumping on social media, instead of just going immediately to the news on your phone, that you just started your day with your Heavenly Father? Lord, I'm just going to read your word. I'm going to start with a devotional. I'm going to start with just a verse. I'm going to start with a chapter. I'm going to start somewhere that begins to feed my mind and fuel my heart and give me the perspective I need to know that you are in control and that I can trust you. I can trust you with my finances. Before I spend on myself and my needs, God, I'm going to trust you first. Maybe for some of you, it's to be baptized. You've never taken that step of faith to say, Lord, I want to go public with my faith. I want the world to know that I'm a follower of Jesus, that the old me going into the water is the death of me, and coming out of the water represents a new me, that I am made new in the image of Jesus, that I am born again, that I have new life, I have new hope, I have new perspective. We want to give you that opportunity. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. For some of you, it's just to get help. You've recognized, I think I've needed a counselor for a while, and I just haven't done it. I haven't put the energy towards it for whatever reason. Maybe you feel it's too expensive. Maybe you feel it's just waste of your time. Maybe you feel like it's just one thing that I've just been setting off to the side, but you know you need help. You need some tools to help you process what you're going through. That's something that we shouldn't have to be embarrassed about it. Would you stand with me? We're going to take communion together, and as we're doing so, as we normally do, we're going to sing a song together that I've been kind of having on repeat all week, and so this is one that's near and dear to my heart that I hope is a blessing to you, and it's certainly one that can be hard to sing because it just talks about how all I want is Jesus, and I know that's like a hard, difficult place to come to, but you can get there. Like, you can get to these places where it's like, you know what? I don't care what other people think. You know what? All these other desires, hey, they're good and they're fine, but I want Jesus more than that. Man, I know there's things that I want to control, but I can trust in the Lord with all my heart and lean not on my own understanding. You can have that today. And so as we take communion has this amazing way of just kind of resetting and recalibrating our hearts, because Jesus used this really strong word, which is to remember. And I think sometimes we forget that. We forget things in our faith. We forget what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to live. And Jesus has this way of just drawing us back to him and just says, remember me. Remember why I came. Remember who I am in your life. Remember what I've done for you. And so this is why we do this as a church regularly. We don't do it once a year. We try to do it at least once a month as a way to remember, to allow Jesus to restore the joy of our salvation. Maybe you're just kind of going through the motions and your faith is bland. Maybe you need Jesus to just kind of light a fire in your soul this morning. And so as we sing, and you can choose to sing if you want, you don't have to. If you're not feeling it this morning, that's okay. But I want to invite you to take communion. Communion is for those that have surrendered their lives to Jesus as a way to remember. And so if you're not there yet, I am so glad that you're here, but there's no pressure to have to participate. Jesus clearly says, like, this is for those that are walking with me and following me and desire to be in relationship with me. And so we've got two stations here. I'm going to invite Joy to come to this table here. I'll be at the other table, and you can choose which one is easiest to get to. I'd ask that you take the elements, bring them back. You can sit, you can stand, you can kneel if you want, whatever posture you want to take as we worship together. And then after the song is over, I'll come back up and lead us in partaking communion together. But come as you feel ready.